It's me. It's Emily. Who said Christina Aguilera? Thank you. For my piece, I could do with one sound effect. Anybody good at hyenas? Ron?
I could do a hyena.
Go for it.
This is terrible, I'm sorry about this.
Oh, that's beautiful. I tell you, would you all please indulge me? And when I get to the third line, say hyena, give it your best, Academy Award-winning Ron Hyena. Thank you. Bluest burning soul. To the left and to the right of me, at north, south, and various points twixt, hyenas. Thank you, bless you. Circling, prowling, scowling, salivating their very intention. Above, vultures, dizzy, dart, dive, rasp and hiss, weave and will, knowing somehow I've lost my will to live. Somewhat ironic then that my once ascendant, all-consuming, brightest shining desire to perish is now sepia faded, near soon fulfilled, near soon replete. Not such a bright idea now, gal, huh? And the sun sears my skin deep through to my soul, bluest burning. The shifting sands, well, shift. And I guess that's hell neath my scorching feet. Is this my time and my place to say goodbye? Whispered somewhat reluctantly into this golden Moroccan abyss, spoke mute into the sirocco, warmest of sand-filled whipping winds. Lost and alone, save for the unwanted company of my past, those myriad interloper memories, unimaginable, too unmanageable to tame, and God knows I've tried. God knows everything she does. It's towards her and her alone. I gotta focus my hope right now. Alone, well, almost alone, in this desert, tempted, tested, tired, soon to be tried for my sins, and we both know I've failed. God, tell me I'm wrong. See, silence set the wind. Cowardly, devoid, broken, yep, broken all right. Searching out the shade of this here solitary stone, soon to be makeshift tombstone, unchiseled. Yet, if it were daubed, it would only say, here lies another ungrateful, self-seeking, dishonest, fearful, powerless, unmanageable loser. Weaker will, heavier heart, stronger desire, R.I.P. Not no romanticized, idealized, I-N-R-I. Arrhenius, Nazarius, Rex, Ludarium, carved into a crux of cypress, cedar and pine. Not no hagiographical stained glass, sanctus, clever wordplay account of my life neither. Hell, I ain't no saint. Ask God, she knows. She knows everything she does. Not no angel neither. Not even close. You couldn't even call me an acceptable, responsible, productive member of society these days. Well, not unless you've been ironic, or you had your fingers crossed behind your back. See? No, sirree, ma'am. This is just another of those mixed metaphorical tragic tales of a mixed up, messed up, fucked up, soon to be tore up sinner drowning in her own sin, withering on the vine amongst the devil's dust bowl, drier than an old-timer's AA meeting, drier than the sand upon this here tongue. I used to live and lived to use, and look at me now. Used up old has-been of a never was ready, I guess, to die. I'm not afraid to die, just not like this. Not as I'd planned it. Not no Thelma and Louise Canyon fodder. Not no defiant Bonnie and Clyde hail of bullets. Not no Janis Joplin heroin overdose, neither. Yeah, this ain't no kind of death. Plain out of gas, plain out of signal, smartphone rendered dumber than a lithium-less, plastically glass-fronted brick. Pride and Joy 66 medium turquoise T-Bird rendered just as obsolete, now only a nostalgic, iconic two-ton heap of aesthetically pleasing retro junk. My only comfort left in this, surely my final hour, keeping me company, well, together with those unwanted demonic flashbacks, is what's left of this £2 soap bar of finest Moroccan hash, scored not less than 2 full rotations round an indifferent clock face just past. This then, my last hurrah, as the haboob sounds its arrival, that violent sandstorm gathering pace, blasting bare leg, whipping me, whipping all. Not, as I'm imagining, and assuming it as true, Christ was whipped in prelude to crucifixion, steadfast, resolute to the end, it is done. Not known neither whipped as Christians persecuted unswerving are, although I am a Christian, that is, I guess, of sorts. Christ knows I try. No, whipped as Mother Nature intended, wind, whip, stone and sinner, and hyena, vulture, and gasless auto come retro pile of junk, indiscriminate in its calling, relentless in its velocity, unfathomably cruel. Jesus Christ, watch the original paintwork, would you? You any idea how much a 66 drop top goes for these days? Especially the mid-turquoise, since that Thelma and Louise film. Irrelevant now, I guess. It's only a car, it's only a film. It's only a film. Oh, we laundered money anyway. What goes around comes around. Like these rigid hands on that indifferent clock face. I guess time immemorial. That's me. Time forgot. Yeah, I've got more on my mind right now than sourcing a 1070 mid-turquoise metallic colour match. What's colour anyway? What's anything anyway? Well, to me. Used up. And my last one act, now I finally found my touchstone, tombstone, final resting place, is to indulge my last use up, and then, yeah, I guess I'm about ready to call it quits. Ready, I guess, to be held to book, Revelations to be precise, all that lambs and goats and 7-horned, 7-crowned dragons. I can already see and hear the sulphurous lake burbling and burbling like some perverse oasis melt into this here sand, vape vying for my synapses against this aromatic, purist, oil-infused, pollen-rich masterpiece of hashish, this gently spiced lubricant between this sorry life and the next, ... Love you all.
Resilience is my bird in the hand. Now my mother's voice echoes in my mind, phrases uttered, family humour, reminded of her scent, her cool hands on my fiery head. Memories that fuel my courage, enable me to withstand all that is gone and all that will be, standing straight and tall, bending when needed, but never breaking. Thank you.
He could measure the absence with rolls of toilet paper. It might take 6 weeks to reach the cylinder of glued cardboard at the centre, whereas before just 10 days might have sufficed. The purchase of just 10 rolls of a year would be enough. 36 seems now such a huge number. He could choose to measure it with tubes of toothpaste, 8 as opposed to 16, or litres of milk, half of 360, with loaves, 70, not 140, or butter, or marmalade, washing powder, soap, and electricity, 1,000 ways, but each established the equivalent consequence. He shifted now, not glided around the rooms. Less there was of tidying or cleaning to make minutes tick faster. It was quiet, much too quiet. I'll read it again. He could measure the absence with rolls of toilet paper. It might take 6 weeks to reach the cylinder of glued cardboard at the centre, whereas before, just 10 days might have sufficed. The purchase of just 10 rolls a year will be enough. 36 seems now such a huge number. He could choose to measure it with tubes of toothpaste, 8 as opposed to 16, or litres of milk, half of 360, with loaves, 70, not 140, or butter or marmalade, washing powder, soap and electricity 1,000 ways, but each established the equivalent consequence. He shifted now, not gliding around the rooms. Less there was of tidying or cleaning to make the minutes tick faster. It was quiet, much too quiet. Doing this now takes 3 times longer than it used to. The cooker's too high. Had to get a microwave. Always resisted till now. We are so vulnerable in the dusk of life. We always were, yet you chose not to notice. We chose not to be insufferable. We wanted to be inviolable. Superpowers, our modern fairy tales, come at such a cost. The child comes to rescue the old man. He was always present, walking alongside. In his hand, an extra wide pencil. In his ear, the voice of his mother. There is no such word as can't. I'll read it again. Doing this now takes 3 times longer than it used to. The cooker's too high. Had to get a microwave. Always resisted till now. We are so vulnerable in the dusk of life. We always were, yet you chose not to notice. We chose not to be insufferable. We wanted to be inviolable. Superpowers, our modern fairy tales, come at such a cost. The child comes to rescue the old man. He was always present, walking alongside. In his hand, an extra wide pencil. In his ear, the voice of his mother. There is no such word as cards.
The title of this is taken from a very typical foster carer recruiting campaign. All you need is a spare room, time to give, and a big heart. Dad, you're bleeding. I put 2 fingers to my stubble-scruffed jaw, feeling the string of droplets oozing from unzipped skin. I'd barely felt the gouge, the pale blue and powder white hollow of pinched skin on my arm. The twin half-crescent shapes of clamped teeth stung a little more. Picking up my glasses, flecked with rain, saliva and grit from the gutter, and squaring them as best I could over my nose, I looked at my incredulous 13-year-old daughter, standing behind the open car door, hesitant. Then into the car at the source of the pain. Strapped at last into the car seat, my foster child was a bundle of horrors. It was her pain, not mine, we were feeling. And all this, on the face of it, just because we'd had to leave the playground. But the face of it is a betrayal of the hard core of pain, welded by a brain miswired by missed attention, flooding her body with a continuous cortisol alarm call. What looks like spoilt petulance at pleasure curtailed is the sublimation of untold miseries and dark mysteries. No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear, wrote C.S. Lewis in A Grief Observed. A 3-year-old doesn't know the words and can only experience, not observe, her feelings, but she scribes with her body more than the wordsmith can, is flooded with the emotions those words denote. Her grief feels so like fear, feels so like anger, feels so like pain, feels so like grief. Certainly, looking into her eyes as I fumbled with her car seat straps, more straitjacket than safety device at this point, I faced the frenzy of her anger, which looked like fear as her nails clawed me away, her fear that looked like grief as her teeth sank into my arm, her grief that looked like pain as her spittle splattered my face and drizzled hers. And as her 2-year-old sister, impervious in the other seat, continued to smile and chatter to herself. Looking into her eyes, I said, in the way we do when we think we are divining someone else's feelings. But that is a fiction. The eyes are inert windows to the retina, not to whatever passes for the soul. I wasn't looking into her eyes, I was merely looking at them. Her pupils dilated, the sclera rimmed with crimson, muscles and ligaments hauling them round their sockets like any other limb. I was looking around them at the creases and furrows that even a small child's muscles, flooded with adrenaline, can wrench into the skin long before age scores them into permanence. Hers was a raging pain that forged that young face through the searing heat of anguish into a momentary mimicry of the weariness and wariness that I fear will be her inheritance, stamped as it is on the caught between smiles expression I see on the face of her mammy when I call to take her and her sister back. Why don't I use the more honest word, away from their weekly contact with her? It's really tempting to use animal imagery to describe this wounded child, frenzying in her emotional trap, snared by the jaws of her twin attachments by birth and borrowing, both flinching from and flailing at this figure who would rescue her. But comparisons with a caught creature are too accurate, too much to bear. I need healing for this child. I cannot face for her the conclusions drawn from the failing heart of the snared rabbit, the broken feathers of the caged bird. Perhaps her wounds are not terminal. Something about the way she looked, bewildered at my bleeding cheek, perhaps the eyes are animated after all, gave me a hint that I must make become hope. The first words I distinctly recall the girl's mum uttering, without any doubt that I'm getting the wording spot on, were directed at her social worker as I hurried the girls back to the car after that first contact. Go fuck yourself. I'm aware that with that observation, I appear to begin a narrative that puts her entirely in the wrong. And that's the tale that's easiest for us foster carers, for most social workers, and for the public to deal with. Even while declaiming there are no winners here, it's terribly sad for all involved. We're constructing a classic hero-villain story, and we have to be the heroes. So we received, a few months into the placement, a formal letter from the head of service commending us on the care we're giving the girls and the positive relationship I've built with their mum through the contact book I write and illustrate with photos of the girls' activities each week. Later, after another emotionally draining review meeting, a social worker tells me what a great job I'm doing, how the girls clearly think the world of me, and I feel the shame of the imposter. Not that imposter syndrome that tells you that your feeling of inadequacy is actually evidence of how great you are, but the real deep sense, chronic and at this point acute, that I really am out of place. It should not be me who's doing this. It should be their mammy. And I'm not doing it as well as I should, anywhere near as well, but unlike her, I can keep up appearances. I started by writing an episode of high emotion and mental distress, manifesting the violence of a physical and vocal meltdown, but I attributed it all to the child. What I didn't admit when writing it, what I don't think I admitted to myself at the time, was that I was probably feeling much the same. My adrenaline levels were high enough not to notice her nails drawing blood from my cheek as I exerted my dominance over that helpless little girl, forcing her into that car seat because, well, obviously we had to get going, to get my daughter back to school, things to do, people to see, oblivious to the little one's earlier traumas that I would learn about later, that made being strapped into a car a source of pure terror. I was thrusting my face into hers, eyes screwed up in anger, challenging her. What are you going to do now then, eh? Holding her arm so that she had no choice of what to do, other than let her inchoate emotions out in tears, spit and screams. It sounds bad. It was bad. But thank my upbringing, my socialisation, whatever it was, that meant I could stay my hand, itching as it was, from giving her a lesson that would have taught her nothing but more fear and made that revolving door of trauma spin ever faster. But still, I wasn't doing enough to stop it. to open a new door instead, to trust, acceptance, value, to the careful, thoughtful, measured and difficult pattern of actions and attitudes that, instead of the warm mush of transient feeling we usually ascribe to that word, we ought to call love. This, as love must always be, is a long exercise in failing less fully. It requires and both gives and takes far more than a big heart. Those girls and their mammy, in whose heart, whatever her failings, there will always be more space for them than I could ever give, deserve no less.
If I'm mad, thank goodness, living within a man-made world of crazy, I belong. Wait a minute. Is this good, bad, or something else? Time to rethink. Gather around people, a serious discussion needed, words to be turned into action. We have work to do. Forget naming all things, still all moving. Stop the damn labelling before we become robotic. People no more. A sobering thought. Being still in silence. The not needed hushed away. Silence with space to welcome in the new. Maybe the do, or change, wastage beyond requirement, needing ease with peace, simply allowing the now reality, time to keep thriving.
My friends, I would like to share with you today some reflections that are partly historical and partly personal. Indeed, I find it difficult to separate the two. 100 years ago yesterday, on January the 7th, 1922, the Irish Free State was founded. That is, Ireland as an independent country. This was the first step on the road to the Republic of Ireland we know today. But if we mark that anniversary, we must also recall that the road led through darkness and horror at times. Young women were confined to the living hell of special institutions for years on end because they had sex outside marriage. Those who gave birth often had their babies taken from them. Some, many, no one knows how many of those babies died mysteriously and were buried in collective graves. There was widespread child abuse by Roman Catholic priests. Ireland has not been a perfect utopia. It is a country still struggling with its pain and its shame. And yet Ireland is a country that has come forward into the light. Very recently, the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, was an openly gay man of Indian heritage, Leo Varadkar. A woman's right to abortion and divorce and contraception and the marriage of same-sex couples are all legally recognised and accepted in Ireland today. An amazing and until then unexpected event occurred in Ireland back in 1990. A woman was elected President of the Republic for the first time, Mary Robinson, a human rights lawyer. Her influence shook up everything. Every corner of Irish life was affected by her. And she insisted on meeting other world leaders, the American President, the Pope, on equal terms. Mary Robinson chose to serve only one 7-year presidential term. But after her, another woman, Mary McAleese, was elected president for 2 terms. I have always been a traveller, and in some of the darkest times of my life, I have often scraped together the money to go to 3 small countries, not really so very far from Wales, at least until Brexit and COVID fell on us. Each of these countries is a small independent republic. I used to go east to Finland. I used to go north to Iceland, and most frequently of all, I used to go west to Ireland. About 18 years ago, I wrote a poem called Ireland Beyond the Razor's Edge. It was published in a journal called Seshat, co-edited by my friend Terence Duquesne, one of the world's greatest experts on ancient Egypt, and by Marcangelo de Brito, a young Afro-Caribbean poet. I think that demonstrates that poetry has no frontiers. Ireland Beyond the Razor's Edge. A caged year, a film of sweat on the skin, the sensation of suffocating. Still, we sensed Ireland there. How could we not sense it this far west? It is just beyond the razor's edge of sunset, Ireland in itself, and for us, island of possibilities. We came to suckle liberation from this island, the juice of alternatives, other visions. Perhaps Bray, the moon bursting on Dublin Bay over a high tide, pushing its face through clouds like sanity through obsessive doubt. Perhaps Powerscourt, a white vehemence of long-falling, smashed water, forced from the high-toothed outlet, received and crushed into this waterfall bowl, hazing the sunlight. Or perhaps Newgrange. What negation of self in Neolithic serenity, quartzite white and turfed green, made this lattice of stone slabs a ceiling above a chamber, to the end of a passageway of secrets, to receive the winter solstice sun. So precisely, along a narrow passage, the looked-for light comes in, or perhaps all the white-napkined eating places of Dublin, now and always a capital of Europe. The General Post Office, still there, ferocious, pillars gouged by the bullets of the birth of the Republic. In this caged year, we sensed Ireland there. We came to suckle liberation from this island, the juice of alternatives, other visions. All dignity is born scarred by bullets, or sooner or later must be protected by them. And along a narrow passageway, the light comes in. A few years before I wrote that poem, the director Neil Jordan made a film about Michael Collins, the man who led the tiny army of Irish fighters to victory against the occupying British Army in Ireland. Britain at that time was still the world's #1 superpower. By the end of the Irish War of Independence, what was left of Michael Collins' army would probably have been able to stand comfortably side by side in this building. That was before the COVID pandemic, of course. Collins was assassinated in 1922, and so this year also marks a century since his death. He was 31 when he was killed. In the film, Michael Collins is asked what he would say to the British government if he had the chance. His words are interesting. Personally, I wish those words could be spoken throughout Wales and Scotland today. However, his words could be spoken today by any woman who claims the right to walk home at night without the threat of violence. His words could be spoken today by any woman or man of colour who claims the right to live and work and play a sport without racist abuse. And his words could be spoken today by any citizen who is sick of the stranglehold of cynical ex-Eton public school boys, sick of complacent ministers and civil servants, sick of little princes and dukes who believe they are quite above having to face allegations of rape and child abuse. Here are his words. Give us the future. We've had enough of your past. Give us back our country to live in, to grow in, to love. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol. This is my first spoken word.
Oh, well done.
So this is called Rebirth. It's an alternative birth story and a love letter to my 2 children. He was born in a storm, ripped from the safe, warm vessel I had created for him. His home for so long. My body thrashed by the heavy, dark waves again and again. My mind frenzied. My heart powerless. He brought the fire, twisting and thrashing his way free, instantly hungry for me, longing to cling to me. We journeyed through the darkness together, him unaware of the terror, only knowing the comfort of my body. She came to me with light, a wonderful serenity, instantly calm. The moment of her birth, I saw myself then, the tiny flame that had been small for so long, flickered and sparked, me, my other, curled up next to it in the darkness, cold and alone in the pit of my belly. She awoke then, this other, when the flame crackled and spat and she flew. She flew out and looked me right in the eyes. She said, I am you and you are me. I could not hide. I could not look away. In that instant, I saw the path, the beginning of a wonderful journey that I could never unsee. Their gift to me was healing, rebirth, a new sense of knowing. My heart was bruised before, tender. They made it full again, plump, cracked it open with an explosion of light that reached every corner, every dark place, obliterating light.
So I'm going to read, first of all, I'm going to read the first chapter of my book. For anyone who doesn't know, it's based on the story of my great-grandparents. The first chapter starts in 1941. The book goes between 1941 and the 1880s. It kind of moves back and forth in time. But this is 1941, the time when Cardiff was being heavily bombed in the war. And the first chapter is called Smoke. It is ice bright, the night of the bomber's moon. In the front room of a terraced house next to the graveyard, Ellen Jordan lies in bed. Her fingers worry rosary beads, and she spits curses at the devils who head over the sea towards them, intent on harming her family who huddle, blanket-wrapped, in the gaslit Anderson shelter in the back garden. In the shelter, Ellen's son, Louis, an unlit cigarette between his lips, fiddles with the wireless knobs to try and find the World Service. Strange voices from across the sea fade in and out as he twiddles, thumping it with his fists every now and again, as though that might help. Do we really want to know? Asks Mary. Her Irish voice, her Irish prayers, spoken silently as she knits with fingers swift as spiders. The small boy Sam listens, impatient, for the bombing to start. As soon as the all clear is sounded, he will be out in the alleyways searching for shrapnel treasure until the sirens howl and everyone skitters for shelter again. His sister, Ellen's Blackberry-haired girl, Teresa, reads Nelson's Jolly Book for Girls with a frown of concentration. Reggie, the corgi on her lap, his legs running in a dog dream. Louis finds the BBC News Bulletin at last, holds a match to his cigarette and sits back to hear what their fate might hold. On the other side of the city, a Caribbean man, Noah Best, patrols the silent streets, his steel helmet heavy on his head, his woolen coat buttoned up to his chin. His legs are bowed, sculpted by the sea that has rolled beneath him for most of his life, and the icy air stabs his bones. He's looking for splinters of light in windows, light that will offer them all to their enemies, though the moon, big and fat as a peach, is doing that job very well. "Turn that light out," he shouts, seeing a faint glow behind a window. His voice echoes in the silver night. The light dies and he walks on. He's looking not only for lights but for people who are lost, who need taking to safety, but there's no one. He's alone in the petrified streets. The city is pewter in the moonlight, waiting, holding its frozen breath. Families huddle in home-built shelters or in cellars and tunnels under the city. He thinks of Ellen, who is not in a shelter. Tonight he's breaking a promise he made many years before to keep her safe. Tonight he can't help her. The bombers are coming. They fly in over the sea in a swarm, hunched and hellish. Panicked seabirds rise up out of the quiet dark and are slivered by the propellers. And on they come, and on. And then the city explodes. "You fucking devils," screams Ellen as the first bomb hits. But after that she can't hear her own voice. She's seen the rage of the planet before, but not like this, nothing like this. The explosions pull pictures from walls, hands from clocks, and crockery from shelves. The statue of Our Lady lies with her blush-pink face in pieces, and rosary beads rend and fly. Ellen closes her eyes and sees trees ripped from the ground, mountains set alight, the dead spat from the graves. Then, the biggest blast of all, and the heavens fall in. The blackout curtain rips from the window and glass rains around her head, and the midnight sky is bright as day. She hangs onto the bars of the bed, her hands blue and translucent in the awful light, as she wills herself to another time and place, rocking on a man's heartbeat. Then there is silence, apart from a sound like a tide washing in. "No need to make such a fuss," a man's voice says in a Caribbean drawl. A sea shanty voice. She opens her eyes and sees a black man standing outside the window, his hair a silver halo in the bright light. He's smoking a woodbine, calm as anything, the smoke curled in the frozen air. It's Samuel. "Why'd they leave you here on your own?" he asks. "I'm a silly old woman," she says. "I tripped on the stairs and broke my hip. It's in as many pieces as those plates in the kitchen. I can't even pee by myself now." She remembers his handsome face, a thoughtful face, she thinks. "You need a barber," she says, and he laughs. "Wanderers have no need for barbers." A wanderer, that's what she was once, and in a way she still is now. They say she's losing her mind, but in truth she's letting it go, a kite in the wind. She has a thought to get up and go with him, but then she remembers her broken old body. "You seem bright?" she asks. Another wanderer, Bright was. "He's been around." Expect he needs a barber too. He always needed a barber, did Bright. He could have had a whole family of birds living in his beard and nobody'd ever have known. Fingers of iced air have slipped into the room and the sky flashes behind Samuel like God's own fireworks display, making a silhouette of him. She can see her own breath, but not his. Only the curling wisp of smoke from his cigarette reminds her of something. "It's the end of the world," she tells him. He shakes his head. Even those bastards aren't bad enough to end the world. She believes him, and she's pleased. Not for herself, as she's tired and ready to go, but for the children. "They're in the shelter," she says. "Louis built it. He's a good boy. You'd be proud of him." He nods, but he seems to be thinking of something else. He isn't looking at her anymore. She looks at his face, still lovely in old age, and an ache passes through her. "Come in out of the cold," she says. "I can't do that," he says. "You know I can't." She closes her eyes and she knows he's gone. 2 tears slip down her cheeks, warm against her china cold skin. She's alone again, and as sound bleeds back into the room, she becomes the exploding world itself. The white hot pain in her bones, the pain of the murdered earth. She can't pray because she has no words left, and she can't cry as her tears have burned away. She waits to be turned to dust. It's a long time later, another lifetime, that there's a siren, footsteps, voices. There's a clammy hand in hers and the scent of a child who smells sweet, of earth, of under the ground. "You're like an angel, Granny, covered in stars." "It's not stars, it's glass." Mary, pulling Teresa away. Oh, good God, she's frozen. Ellen no longer feels cold, but she is aware of the trembling of her body. She feels blankets being wrapped around her, hears a coal scuttle being dragged across the floor. Further away she can hear the sirens and bells of the shocked city. Then, another voice. "I came as soon as I could." She recognises Noah's voice, sees his shadow in the doorway taking off his hat. He sits by her bed. "It's over now," he says. His lovely island voice. She was on that island once, a long time ago. She remembers the sound of the wind in the tall sugarcane and the strange bird song. And then she remembers running along a dust track, salt sweat in her eyes, running after a man whose heart had been broken. She thinks to mention Samuel's visit last night, but then decides against it. She closes her eyes as Noah rubs warmth back into her hands. The voices dance around her. "Whole street's gone," they say. She can't imagine it, how a street can be there and then not. How is the world so frail? And then Teresa's voice, anguished. "Oh no, look." Teresa holds the pieces of a blue sea-washed bottle, and in the palm of her hand a small ship made of driftwood and toothpicks, broken in the storm. Ellen reaches for the ship, picks apart the pieces. "We can fix that," says Noah, but around them Mary is sweeping glass and small smashed treasures, sweeping it all away, and it's too late, because something has gone that cannot be fixed or replaced. The small curl of smoke from the ship's chimney. Sorry. This is back in 1887 now. Samuel is a ship's cook from Barbados, and Ellen went off to sea with him. And he's been writing letters back and forth to his mother in Barbados, and she's been telling him about this. She's moved off the plantation where she was working, and she's got this lovely little house, and she sends him descriptions of this lovely house. At last, he's managed to find a ship that he can take Ellen on to go and meet his mother. So they're in Barbados here. Seymour and his donkey Freddie took them north in a cart. Ellen sat in the back, her parasol shading her from the sun. Samuel sat up front with Seymour, chatting. Seymour was old, but as sinewy as a boy with sea-green, smile-creased eyes. Ellen gathered during the chat that there were people they both knew, friends of friends, cousins of cousins, but she didn't try to keep up. They travelled along the coast road for a bit, the cart rocking with the donkey's tap-tap rhythm. The sea was the colour of washed glass, fork-tailed seabirds diving. Palm trees trailed their tendrils onto pale sand, and solitary fishermen sat dreaming on rocks. She heard the voice of the sea. "Hush," it said. "Hush." They turned inland onto a dusty track through villages of painted wooden houses. Samuel turned to Ellen to point out the houses' ornate fretwork, their pretty shingle roof tiles. "My father was a carpenter, made things like that." Dogs pretended to guard their homes as they passed, hurling themselves towards the cart before giving up and dropping down into the hot dust. Old men sat in the shade of palms and banana trees playing dominoes, and pigeons sheltered under benches, open-beaked. As the cart rattled across a wooden bridge over a pond, women who were scrubbing clothes on the bleached rocks turned to watch them, arms up to shade their eyes. Ellen saw a toad on a boulder, sitting still as a statue, white egrets in a freshly ploughed field, a hummingbird feeding from a red flower. They arrived at a small village in the north of the island. There was a smell of fried fish coming from somewhere, and the air was full of the fluty voices of birds. The sea exhaled down below, sliding over coral, and the rugged Atlantic coast was soft with sea spray. "Wait here," said Samuel, and Ellen's stomach constricted. Samuel went to talk to a woman who'd been watching them from her front porch. "Is that her?" Ellen wondered. Seymour took a knife from his pocket, cut a coconut from a tree, and sliced the shell. "Make you strong," Seymour said, and rolled up his sleeves to show her his sinewy arms. More people came out of their houses, gathered round Samuel. Seymour sliced a piece of coconut shell and gave it to Ellen. A spoon. Inside the coconut it was translucent, like jellyfish. In the cluster of people there was fast chatter, pointing, shaking of heads. "Clear as the skin," said Seymour to Ellen, and then giggled, indicating that she was using the spoon back to front. She turned the spoon round, tasted the sweet fruit, and nodded to Seymour. Yes, she liked it. A lizard sashayed across the track in front of the cart and disappeared into long grass. The donkey shuffled on his knuckly legs and sighed. Samuel was walking back to them. Ellen waited, but he didn't speak to her. Climbing back into the cart beside Seymour, he said something that Ellen didn't catch, and Seymour clipped the donkey's reins and they headed back the way they'd come. Ellen turned, saw the group of neighbours watching them go. The donkey cart rocked back through the island, this time passing between tall fields of singing sugarcane. The donkey twitched his ears and tail against small, insistent flies. Ellen leant forward, tapped Samuel on the shoulder. "What's happened? Where's your mother?" "She doesn't live there." "But she must do. You sent money." "I sent it to the General Post Office, not to a house." Windmills spun, indolent, and the sugarcane bowed in the breeze. And then Seymour pulled the donkey up. "This is the best place to stop," he said. Samuel got out of the cart and Ellen stood up too. Samuel hesitated before helping her down, as though he didn't want her to come. "Take your time," said Seymour, before settling himself down under the drooping fronds of an ancient bearded fig tree and pulling his hat down over his eyes. Samuel, followed by Ellen, walked through cane higher than their heads, the lovely rustle of it. The field opened onto a manicured lawn, and at the far end of the lawn stood a large bay-windowed Jacobean house. "What is this place?" "This is where I grew up." Ellen started to follow Samuel across the lawn, but he turned and said, sharp, "Wait here." She found a shaded bench and sat down, surrounded by hibiscus, orchids, roses, mango, avocado, and breadfruit trees. The garden ran down to another field of whispering sugarcane, and beyond that, a sliver of sea of the deepest turquoise. From the open windows of the house, she could hear women's laughter, the rise and fall of the servants' voices. Strange birds sang in a woodland of dark, tall trees behind the house. And through the trees, half hidden, a row of painted wooden huts. She thought, he was a little boy here in these scented gardens. She imagined him running, climbing trees. What a lovely little boy he must have been. A cockerel crowed. Even in the shade she was hot, little streams of sweat dribbling from under her hat. She fanned herself with her hands. She could hear the tinkle of teacups from the cool of the house. Then, through the languorous afternoon, a burst of raised voices, men shouting. Samuel appeared from the back of the house. Ellen stood up. Samuel strode towards her, but he passed without looking at her, his eyes hard, blank, reflecting nothing. She hitched up her skirt and ran after him. Samuel, what is it?" He kept on walking. The whispering cane bent before him, then regrouped above his head. At the bottom of the field, watched by a white man on a horse, were a group of labourers, men in sweat-soaked vests with stone-sculpted arms, swiping large machetes at the cane's feet. Women, their heads wrapped in wreaths of cloth, hauling the heavy bunches of cane onto carts. The carts were hitched to bow-headed horses, shivers darting across their wet coats, tails slapping the flies away. Barefoot children sucked at sugarcane leaves. How can they work in this heat? Ellen wondered. The white man caught his horse up when he saw Samuel, circled him as though to stop him, but Samuel walked straight on without seeing him, and the man pulled his horse up and just watched him go. Something about the way he walked made him unapproachable even to a foreman. Ellen caught up with him on the dusty lane, grabbed his arm. His eyes still didn't see her, were elsewhere, and she was afraid. "What is it? Where's your mother?" "Gone," he said. "Gone dead?" "Gone dead."
Sea salt waves, sea salt smiles, green and brown palm trees as tall as the Eiffel, clean concrete roads that go for miles, thick air and heat moving between the buildings, bright blue skies, not one cloud in sight, wide roads made with light, lean grey, chairs seated at the side of the road, shops for shorts and shops for tiny, shiny ornaments. Sea salt waves and sea salt smiles. The patient wait for the next wave to rise.
Begin anew. New Year's Eve's ever vociferous palaver is over. Cathartic, anarchic parties, wookie wacko echoes, egress. Devilish revelry ends here, for veering reverie's coterie. Buzzy, scuzzy excesses access fuzzy memories' recesses. Watershed dawn awakens harlequin-hued. Fizz-dizzy iridescence whizzes in, dismisses misty cities' Cimmerian opacity. Stunning, sunlit shards dress slanted, slated rooftops in elan. Munificent optimism's lucent gleams seem supreme. Wearing cherry garb, chirruping bardbirds perch perkily, top-chipped chimney pots. Enamoured with glamour, quavering avians bathe within winter's winsome glints. Glimmers twist twixt chinks in chintz curtains, summoning the somnolent, prizing buddies' bodies from Betty Buys. Such sludgy, budgy sluggards budge, but begrudgingly. Thus this maundering morning nestles next to the smugly, snugly, snoozy, woozy. Boggled cognizance makes an uncertain entrance, then entrances. Incipient sentiment sends even insentient sots into lachrymosity's emotional ocean. A nascent eon sallies forth, unsullied by OTO's drudgery, untrammeled by odious antipathy. Amiability sublimely stymies grimy negativity, neath the cerulean empyrean. Whirligig-giddy naivety and newbie novelty nimbly shimmy nearby. First frost fresh, blessed best intentions still stand intact. Quixotic, poetic ideals monopolize millions' minds. Newly turned leaves conjure nostalgia. Somnambulant amid dreamy imagery, Rome rhymes reams, realms. Muster masters censorious voices to bid adieu to bad vices, seemingly redeemable, nevermore a liability, better be. Shelve selfishness, expunge indulgence, crush its senseless essence to much. Usher other erstwhile errors toward yesteryear's earlier eras. Fell, foul falsehoods, grasping veracity, chivy vivacity to the fantastic fore. New brooms, brindled bristles brush former failings back into bygone days. For a few splendiferous moments, ineffable all feel thankful to dwell inside perennial serenity. Pray, stay a while.
The woman in the willow tree. In the summer, she is so covered in ivy, she is barely identifiable as human. The forest is old, older than the villages around it. The willow tree is older than the mountains that surround it. They say the woman scorned too many lovers. They trapped her there for her arrogance. She is blameless. There is a woman in the willow tree. You can see her alabaster skin through the ivy, but only in autumn, when the leaves have thinned. It glints gently in the sun. They say a sculptor carved her out of marble. They say she was the most beautiful sculpture ever made, carved so delicately, she looked like she would breathe in the wrong light. They say his wife couldn't stand competing with the statue, and so the sculptor hid his finest creation in the old woods to spare her from her wife's jealousy. She is blameless in this. There is a woman in the willow tree. She has been motionless for so long, trapped by the ivy. The willow strands frame her. How long has it been? They say she is actually a statue, carved of the marble from the nearby mountains. They say her sculptor spent days, months, years perfecting her, his image of the ideal woman. He did not eat nor sleep while he chiseled her, long after his joints croaked in protest, stone-like. They say he let his wife raise his children, his house, his business, as he carved his perfect woman, stone-like. They say she hid the statue in the forest, cursing it when it almost breathed, when it almost blinked. She thought that perhaps she would get her husband back. She thought she could save him, her family. She could not compete with the statue. She is blameless. There is a woman in the willow tree. It has been years since anyone has seen her face. They say she is a princess, the fairest of all, cast to eternal sleep. They say she will awaken with true love's kiss. She is covered by thick vines, trapped. All you can see are her lips, her breasts, her hips. She is blameless. There is a woman in the willow tree. In the winter, the ivy leaves have long fallen, tightly bound to the tree. Their roots have grown into her flesh. It is the closest you can see to her actual form, if you can find her. They say she was a fair maiden in the village, with many, many men offering marriage. She rejected them all. They say she was taken against her will on a moonlit night, her skin painted white. They say she killed the man who did it, the mayor's son, screamed her vengeance as they tied her to a willow tree on a moonlit winter night and let her freeze to death. She is blameless. There is a woman in the willow tree. The marble she is made from is far older than the forest, than the mountains surrounding her. It has lasted too long. The ivy that covers her is foreign. It buds red berries in spring. They say she is a demon, the harbinger. They say that the day she wakes is the ending of this time, of these halcyon days. Her lips are bare, they smile, they smirk. She is blameless. Thank you.
Troubles smear this world like a plague. Loss affects many in this world, but those who suffer more and lose their one precious life, the way to heal the hurt is to consider that heaven has not come to take them from us, but to liberate their souls.
Dawn breaks cold and grey. Excitement mounts. Ferry to France, blue on white, bobbing on the tide with open maw. Diesel smell mixed with sea saltiness. Drive on gingerly, parking close like mechanical sardines. Escape the tightly packed hold, pour onto open decks, breathing in freshness, sun-sparkled sea, revives tired eyes that spot France ahead, hazy and mysterious. Sudden cramp of the ramp, disembark onto roads marching down through France to Provence. Stately trees line the route, tall and wispy thin. Warm air heightens colour, earth reddens, blue sky sings. Scented fields stretch purple and lavender. Green watermelons ooze red flesh. Cannes at last, and a pine-scented beach, water calm and seductive, lapping fine sand, pale and clean. Skin warmed by welcome sun. Erect tent city, shaded by peach trees, heavy with succulent fruit, ripe, juicy, ready to pick. Scented evening darkens, a storm, thunderous and wild, pours torrents of rain, drenching odorous red earth, tempting croaky toads out to play. Rivulets of water stream freely to a churning sea. A wakeful night, then glorious morning, light and warmth restored. We are here, and all is well.
Home of Girls. I'm scarce not ready to perform or go on stage yet. The start of new beginnings. Wear something sexy, too much to do. Making a cake for Sue. Probably go into black and white films. Don't overthink it. Make it happen. Let me try the pop and funkiness of music to use. Getting up in my own time, in general, without opening the door, says Frankie. Not used to COVID, but she is not used being here in the countryside. I love dancing. I do my own creation, not ready to perform again. Not only that, dancing in around the studio.
You can shout "get off, Ron" or "shut up, Ron." Because
Shut up, Ron.
Yeah. Annie will tell me to shut up. We're going to start with one of Lizzie's songs, and we're going to ha ha ha. We're going to whisk you back to Victorian London because it feels a bit like that now. Okay, so you've got to all imagine all the men have got top hats, and all the ladies are full of gin. There's a man, street monkey grinder.
A monkey grinder?
A monkey grinder, that's terrible, isn't it? It was like that in Victoria.
You've got a weird idea of Victorian times, I think. Are we ready?
Yeah, go on then, yeah.
1, 2, 3.